All that was needed now was for them to have a land to live in, for them to finally obtain that long-awaited promise of God, the promised land. Now, God had given the command to spy out the land. That wasn't their idea. God gave the command, go spy out the land. Get an idea of what's out there, because none of you have ever been there. Get a feel for the land, so you know what's there. But his command to spy out the land was not so that they could go out and make a determination as to whether or not they could actually receive this promised land or actually go into it. That was not the point. It was a foregone conclusion. This was going to be their land. God was giving it to them. And they were in the land for 40 days, spying it out, looking it over. And they came back after 40 days and gave their report. And the book of Numbers should have ended right there. That should have been it. You see, the book of Deuteronomy is Moses' address to the people before they go into the promised land. His address to the people, reminding them of the things God has commanded, and now we're getting ready to go. And that should have happened right here. But it didn't. Because there was not unity among the spies concerning the report they brought back about the land. Now they all agreed this was an awesome land. Well, we've been walking through this desert the last year or so, and this land, nothing like what we saw in Egypt. This land is flowing with milk and honey. I mean, they had brought back some of the fruit of the land. They took one grape cluster from a vine, and they had to tie this grape cluster to a pole and carry it between two of them on a pole. It was so heavy. And they brought that back, and they said it's a land flowing with milk and honey. As the VeggieTales character said, that sounds sticky. But to say it's flowing with milk and honey means that this land provides everything that we could need to sustain us. That's the milk. It doesn't mean there are rivers of milk and rivers of honey. It means it has everything we need to sustain us and to make us happy. That's the honey, the sweet stuff of life. It has everything we could need. And they all agreed, yes, the land is awesome. Despite that, 10 of the spies gave a bad report of the land. So we read in verse 32. They gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land. Think about that for a second. This is the promise of God. This is God's ordained destiny for the children of Israel. What they have been looking for. God has said, I am giving you this. And they look at it and give a bad report about what God has said He wants to give. Now their problem wasn't with the land itself. The problem they had was the obstacles that stood between where they are now and actually possessing the land. And that, of course, was the people who currently possess the land. And they looked at them and they said, those people are huge. They're giants. Doesn't fear just magnify things? Man, they said we are like grasshoppers to them. They'll just reach over and squish us. They're huge. And they live, we were hoping maybe they lived in tents out on the desert. We could just blow them away. But they live in these big fortified cities with walls around them. There's no way we can enter the land. And they saw the obstacles. And they kept talking about that. And Joshua and Caleb, who had gone, and these were men who had a heart for God. And they looked at the land and they saw it was good. And they're listening to these men complain. And they're like, yeah, and? We have God! Come on! We have God, guys! We can take the land. We saw Him take us out of slavery. I mean, we had no weapons or nothing. We took us out of slavery and gave us freedom. We've seen Him provide us with food and water in the middle of the desert. We saw Him part the Red Sea. Didn't look like there was any way we could do that, but we Come on, guys, we're serving God. We can do it. But the people listened to the 10. They went the way of fear rather than the way of faith. So much so that they wanted to stone Joshua and Caleb for continuing to insist that they couldn't have the land. Don't rob me of my fear. I want to have a bad attitude about this. I've been convinced. Now quit trying to convince me otherwise. I think we've all heard that kind of a thing. I do not want to feel better about this situation. And that's the way it was. Shut them up. And if we keep reading from here, which we will not, we can keep reading throughout the chapter, we find out that it is this event, the people's refusal to want to go into the land, that causes them to have to wander the wilderness for 40 years.